Hi there, my name is Mr. Doyle, and this is a great undertaking. The 1970s was a huge decade for Stephen King, in which he had only just begun to establish himself as well as the king of horror. But that was only the beginning of King's massive bibliography, and his output in the decade that followed is arguably when his most influential, genre-defining novels saw publication, the first of which was Firestarter in 1980. In this video, the first in the Firestarter series, I'll be taking a closer look at the novel, and in upcoming videos I'll be covering the movie adaptation that came out in 1984, and also the 2002 TV miniseries entitled Firestarter Rekindled, which is sure to be a festering pile of absolute mule shit. If you can't tell, I'm very excited to watch that one. Synopsis as provided within the novel. 1969. Nice. A man and a woman are subjects of a top-secret government experiment designed to produce extraordinary psychic powers. 1970. They are married and have a child, a daughter. 1972. The daughter first shows signs of a wild and horrifying force growing within her. Desperately, her parents try to train her to keep that force in check, to act normal. Now, the government wants its brainchild back for its own insane ends. Terror becomes child's play, death is everywhere, and the chase is on. History and inspiration. The publication of The Dead Zone in August of '79 and of Firestarter only a year later marked a new era for King, in which he left publisher Doubleday in favor of a deal with Viking in conjunction with New American Library. Despite his success throughout the '70s, Doubleday was reportedly apprehensive in regards to promoting and developing the King brand. They felt King was likely to be pigeonholed as a tacky horror author, and they treated his books like second-rate rags. Viking, on the other hand, embraced the King brand and recognized the power and appeal of the horror thriller genre. As a result of their support of King's burgeoning career, The Dead Zone and Firestarter sold far more copies in their first year than King's previous publications with Doubleday. While not all of his novels in the years that followed would be exclusively published with Viking, King would continue to publish with Viking through the late 90s. It's safe to say that King's future and career were cemented during his time working with Viking, and their partnership was instrumental in making him into the iconic author he is today. In terms of inspiration, in the afterword for Firestarter, King reveals that there were a number of inexplicable, unpleasant, or fascinating accounts that culminated to form and inform the story, chief among them being government-led programs to isolate and exploit psionic abilities, as well as to administer experimental drugs to unwitting test subjects on multiple occasions. These experiments often focused on telepathic communication as well as other wild talents such as levitation and pyrokinesis. And some of these conspiracy theories involving government-led research into ESP and all variety of psychic phenomena have proven to be true over the years. For example, the CIA recruited who they believed to be mind readers in the 1970s to spy on the Soviets. This operation was focused on investigating the potential for psychic phenomena in military and domestic intelligence applications. The operation primarily involved remote viewing, the purported ability to see events, sites, or information from a great distance. To quote from a 2018 article from History.com, quote, "In 2017, the CIA declassified some 12 million pages of records revealing previously unknown details about the program, which would eventually become known as Project Stargate. By the time the program was shut down in 1995, psychics known as remote viewers had taken part in a wide array of operations, from locating hostages kidnapped by Islamic terrorist groups to tracing the paths of fugitive criminals within the United States." Unquote. There have been numerous articles written on the topic of experimental government tactics in recent years, and I have linked some in the description for anyone who is curious about the history behind these studies and experiments. Reception and cultural impact. Firestarter was well received upon its publication and garnered high praise from the critics of the day. A few quotes from those critics include, quote, "meticulously realized backgrounds and strong threads of human compassion, a gripping piece of entertainment," unquote, and also, quote, "expert, fast-paced suspense, an exciting thriller, and finally, when the story gets going, it really cooks." Firestarter has gone on to inspire a number of movies, stories, and TV shows, most notably among them being the Netflix series Stranger Things. The Duffer Brothers, the creators of Stranger Things, have made no secret of the story's influence on the series, and while some critics felt that they were stealing ideas from King rather than merely paying homage, there is truth to the old saying about imitation being the sincerest form of flattery. Regardless, this is yet another example of how King had managed to write a story which had an impact and influence that would still be felt 40 years after its publication. The overview. In the midst of the devious antics of the government agency known as the Shop, and exploration of Charlie's inherited superpower, there is another, more relatable based theme running throughout Firestarter. When in her infancy Charlie begins to show signs that she is not a normal child, Andy and his wife Vicky never give up on her or let her abnormalities consume or define her. They help her to gain control and understanding. They guide her and nurture her, and that is essentially what any good parent would do for their child, whether they are a normal child or otherwise. King portrays Andy and Vicky as compassionate and understanding, but also they have come to terms with the special needs of their child and have made every effort to guard and protect her. It is this deep instinctual need of a parent to protect their child that serves to procure empathy from the reader. In the story, it is Andy, Charlie's father, who goes to great lengths to ensure his daughter's safety. Perhaps the fact that I currently have a daughter that is the same age as Charlie during her time on the run that has made me more susceptible to this particular narrative, but the reader is equally able to feel Andy's desperation and his love for Charlie throughout the story. Andy does everything in his power to keep Charlie from being captured by the agents of the Shop, even when he is made to suffer as a result of his efforts. He's willing to risk his own life in order to preserve Charlie's, and he fights until the very end to save her. King and the magical child trope. With Firestarter, King found himself further exploring a topic that he had written about previously and would continue to expand upon and re-examine numerous times from various angles. The topic is, of course, characters, typically children, with seemingly magical, supernatural, or psychic abilities. While writing Firestarter, King began to worry that he was recycling ideas, and initially he shelved the book, fearing that he was spiraling into self-plagiarism and parody. However, he had a change of heart and felt it was possible to elevate and explore these phenomena in different ways and circumstances that would make for an entirely different story. In Carrie, he wrote about a pubescent young girl with the power of telekinesis. In The Shining, he wrote about a child, Danny, who had visions and could see dead people. In The Dead Zone, the protagonist Johnny has premonitory intuitions and abilities during adolescence that become more pronounced in adulthood. And in Firestarter, he endowed Charlie with the power of pyrokinesis, which allows her to start fires with her mind. These are just a few examples, but the magical child trope can be found within a number of King novels, and while he likely made a conscious effort to avoid beating this trope to death for years following Firestarter, he does find his way back to the idea. For instance, two of his most recent novels, The Institute and Later, both involve children with fantastic abilities. And while some of these stories and character portrayals share common themes and topics, King manages to be self-aware and self-critical enough to ensure he isn't lazily regurgitating his stories. In Carrie, her powers seem to naturally reside within her. It's something she is born with that escalates and expands over time as a result of trauma and strife. In Firestarter, Charlie, like Carrie, is born with her powers. However, they are the result of a government-funded science experiment going awry, rather than an innate, naturally occurring phenomenon. And this is largely where the stories differ. We don't necessarily understand how Carrie's powers come to fruition. There is no rational explanation. But with Charlie, we are given an explicit understanding of just how she has come to possess these powers. Regardless of King's revisiting of familiar subject matter, he does manage to create a wholly different reading experience from one book to the next. Personally, I've never felt that King was retelling this one story over and over again, and I've come to appreciate his ability to craft such drastically different tales while utilizing familiar ideas and themes over the years. Final thoughts. Firestarter was King's first contribution to the 1980s, and a continuation of an already developing legacy in the making. His ability to tell a story of the wildly outrageous and unbelievable, and yet to make it relatable to the reader, further strengthened his reputation and yet again proved his aptitude as an author. Additionally, Firestarter is a great example of King's ability to make us fear the immoral motives of men and make us far more weary the malicious intent of humans than we are weary of any inhuman monsters. In the next video, I will be taking a look at the feature-length film adaptation of Firestarter, which stars Drew Barrymore, and while it's not great, it's a great deal better than the critics gave it credit for. New videos drop on this channel every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so be sure to poke the bell with your flesh needles to get reminders for the thing I just said about new videos dropping on this channel every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay, goodbye. Be sure to click like and subscribe to the channel for my continued analysis of all things Stephen King, pretty please with blood and guts on top. My name is Mr. Doyle, and this is a great undertaking.